Exciting news today as we debut a brand new line of Joggles foam stamps designed by Elizabeth St. Hilaire. They join her line of 9x12 stencils with us, and in today's video I'll show you options for using them, talk about cleaning and care, and in general get pretty creative with them. This release includes 15 designs, most of which are round or curvy. These stamps are sized to be comfortable to hold in your hand and easy to use, and they create interesting imagery and layers. Most are between 3.5 to 4 inches in diameter or at their longest point. Foam stamps are also perfect for use with a gel press plate, though for today I'm concentrating on inking and stamping. I'm working with several of our surfaces, including white, smooth, and sturdy in the disc-bound 6x9 journal, in the ring-bound 6x12 pages. I've got some index cards, and I also have a couple of samples that I made on some small black, smooth, and sturdy pages. The basic care for foam stamps is pretty simple. You just have to clean them after using. On an ongoing basis, that helps keep the stamps in good shape to create the best images. I almost always use water-based products, so we'll often wipe the heavy leftover paint or stamp it off, and then I just put it face down in a puddle of water if I'm not ready to stop what I'm doing. You can put them in a container of water, just don't let them sit overnight or for hours and hours. And you can see that these stamps, you can see the after effect of the Art Alchemy paint because there's some glittery stuff going on. That's not going to impede how well the stamps work, but if you let layers of paint crust on here, then yeah, they're not going to make as crisp an impression. So in general, I apply paint in one of two ways. I either brayer it directly onto the surface, or I smooth some out onto my nonstick craft sheet, and then I dip the stamp into it. So to start with, I'm going to show you how I just brayer color on. I'm going to use some Paper Artsy Fresco finish, and I have Finnabair's Art Alchemy paint also. So with that said, let's bring in some Art Alchemy. Slide these out of the way. And the first stamp that I'm going to work with, the name is Be With Me. So this is Be With Me. This is a 6x9 white, smooth and sturdy page that has some oxide sprays on it. And this is Finnabair's paint that is named Amethyst. It's a dark purple, so it's gonna, even though this is a busy background, this is dark enough to contrast, and the stamp has got enough solid area on it to contrast really well. So when I do this, typically what I'm going to do is take a palette knife and just put some paint out on my surface. And this, of course, is the advantage of having your surface covered with nonstick craft sheet. It is a palette in all ways, shapes, and forms, and it's easy to work with. So this is the Dina Wakley, Diane Reevely brayer that goes with their gel printing products. I find this size pretty small, pretty handy rather. It's the small of the two. This is small, the other one I think is medium. But I find this size really handy for the way that I work. You might like the larger one better. You might like a big old speedball brayer. I mean, they come as big as 6 inches. I just find that this works pretty well for what I'm doing. So you can see that I'm just casually brayering the color on. This kind of an application will often cause a little bit of clumping. It's not as smooth as the one I'm going to show you in the next segment, but it works. You know, I mean, it's an opportunity to get a layer of paint on there reasonably quickly. And then at that point, it's just press in place. And if this is a bigger stamp, I always try to be certain that I press in the center to make sure that that part of the design transfers. It's easy to get the edges to transfer. You have to kind of think about it, and you can see I didn't press perfectly well there, but you have to think about it a little bit more to get that center to print correctly. Now I'm obviously not going to do this more than the 2 times you see here. I'm just going to use up the paint that I've got. Alright. Go ahead and print that again, and this time I'll work to make certain that that center is properly printed, and hopefully it will be this time. Ah, see? There we go. That's better. So again, this is a stamp that has a very bold image, so even though the background is busy, it shows up really well in the color contrast. So I'm just going to take water. I'm going to make a puddle off to one side. There's really not much to stamp off of here, and I don't want to waste the time, so I'm just going to put that face down in some water. I'm going to very quickly just clean my brayer and then wipe up what's on my surface. Alright. So then the next 2 that I'm going to bring in, we'll get rid of that in that direction, put the cap on the amethyst. The next 2 that I'm going to bring in, I think this one is called, this is Dragonfly, if I'm not, yep, that's an Art Alchemy that's named Dragonfly. This stamp is named Citrus Wheel, and I'm going to bring in the fresco finish that's named Peacoat. I've got, again, a nice contrasting colors here, and on this particular background, both of them are going to work really well. So when you use two colors like I'm going to, the process is actually very similar to what I just did. The only difference is that I'm going to let the blending happen on the surface of the stamp however it happens. I'm not going to work real hard to do anything to get this to blend in any particular way. I'm just going to allow it to blend based on however it's applied by the brayer. And it doesn't make any difference which one you start with, so I'm just going to start with the Dragonfly. In comes the stamp. Now I could clean the Dragonfly off before I pick up the blue, but I'm not going to because I like this sort of blending, this very indiscriminate, haphazard blending that happens. And if I think I've gone a little bit heavier with the blue than I wanted, I can just come back into the green and apply some over the top. And this is where things can get a little bit thicker and clumpier, but as far as I'm concerned, that's just part of the process, and I don't really have any problem with that. Again, I want to be certain I'm pressing enough in the center to get that part of the design to transfer. And you can see that I've got the shiny that goes along with the fact that the Art Alchemy is metallic. I've got that darker color in there that is in fact the fresco finish, which is very flat, very matte. And you get these kind of fun blends that happen. This is part of the enjoyment for me is not just the play about doing this, it's this kind of playing that I enjoy as well. Alright, so let's, for the heck of it, just brayer some of that color off, and then come back and pick up a little bit more of the green and lay it on there. Oops, it would help if I didn't stick the page in the paint. And there you go. Again, same process, very similar. Whoops, let me hold this so that you can see it. Very similar result, and I like the idea that the images are falling off the edges of the page. I always find that lends a much more interesting look. So the other application process is to ink the stamp by pressing it into a puddle of paint that's been smoothed out, and I'm going to show you that next. I like the look that you get when you blend two colors together. It kind of forms an ombre pattern, and you can do that with two colors, you can do it with multiple. I'm actually going to show you with two and with three. So for this first example, this is a stamp named Sensuous Spiral. This is a 6x6 white smooth and sturdy disc bound page, and I have Sparks Unicorn Hair, geez, and if I could read this, this is Sparks Green Goblin. So same kind of process, although now that that's dirty from my hands. I'm just going to put a little bit of paint out of both of these colors, and then I'll make that ombre I've just mentioned. Alright. So I'm just going to put it out so that it's kind of almost in the pattern I need it to go in. Because I know I'm going to create an ombre, doing it like this kind of gives me a head start on that process. Let's just clean this off. Alright, my trusty brayer. Now, admittedly, the brayer sometimes doesn't want to roll here, but you can kind of coax it into doing that eventually. But you can see that I have that blend going on in the middle, which is far smoother than I'm ever going to create if I do that physically on the stamp. So I'm just going to spread this out till it's wide enough to accommodate the full width of the stamp. Now, the nice thing about this brayer, these little feet, if I turn it and work with it this way, I can put it down like that, and the brayer is not actually touching the surface. So all I'm going to do is come in here and go ahead and ink this by tapping it up and down, and I can see that I don't have enough paint, so I'm just going to kind of scooch it around a little bit so I get enough color on there. And I can see that in the same way that you might have to press in the middle to get that to stamp, you sometimes have to press in the middle to get it to ink. So that is basically done at this point. Go ahead and give it a good press so I know that the center actually prints. And there you go. And so how cool is that? It's a nice even gradation. It moves and it blends nicely in the center. Let's hold that so you can see it without the glare. And it gives you the opportunity to create like this, and you can't do that if you're inking directly on the stamp. So again, a puddle of water off to the side. I'm going to put that face down. Now I have all this paint left, so let's grab, just for the heck of it, let's grab another of the 6x6 disc-bound pages and just start printing what's left on there. Again, there's nothing special going on here. All I want to do is pick up the paint so it's not wasted. And I actually got a little bit of the circular pattern in there. This is the start of a background. It doesn't have to be fantastic. A little bit of water. It just has to be the start so that I don't lose or don't not use what's there. The Art Alchemy paint and anything that's sparkly has a tendency to look really cool on the black, smooth and sturdy. Now this is pretty well watered down, but once that dries, there will be color and sparkle on there. All right, and I've used enough of that I feel like I can just wipe it up and get rid of it. So now let's go for the gusto and let's try an ombre with 3 colors. But first I need to clean my brayer off, so I'm going to roll the worst of that off. Just use a little bit of water because I'm going to use different colors and I don't want to make a muddy mess. So we'll just cover the 2 Sparks colors. This time I'm going to use a stamp that's named Sunny. And the reason that I'm choosing to use this is because it's a pretty big, broad design, and that's going to give me enough space for the ombre, the 3-color ombre, to actually show. I am covered with paint. Okay, so this time, let's get that out of the way. I have Metalique. This is Mermaid Tails, Sparks, Fairy Wings, and Sparks Enchanted. Just give them all a little bit of a shake. Same thing, I'm going to lay them out in a similar pattern so that they are kind of ready to go. I'm not going to put as much paint out this time though, because that really was way too much the last time. Now since I know that green and pink are going to kind of make mud, although these 2 colors actually work well together, and if you don't overmix them, they don't make mud, but just for the sake of argument, we're going to say that green and coral or green and pink would make kind of a muddy mess, so I'm going to work around that by putting the pinky coral color next to the blue, although if there's enough orange in that, that could cause a problem too, but we're just going to go for it and see what happens. Again, I'm going to come in here, it always helps. Well, that was dumb. I had my brayer turned the wrong way. Don't do that. Do as I say, not as I do. Alright, so I'm going to come in and get this going, and then I'm going to drag it over into the other color. So I just kind of get that ombre thing going. Now technically I just dragged the pink into the center, but it creates another stripe and I'm okay with that. So same thing, I want to get this pressed down, and if you have to wiggle it or move it around a little bit, you can do that. Just don't go side to side because then your stripes will start to overpower, they will overprint each other, I guess is where I'm trying to go with that. Alright, so let's do this like this. Go ahead and put it on there. Oh, see, that worked. I go from green to, well, there's my extra pink stripe, to blue to pink again. So with a larger design like this and, you know, enough space to do it on, you can create some really interesting effects, and you can do things on a surface like this that is much more difficult to accomplish than if you're working directly on the surface of the stamp. So with those basic techniques out of the way, I'm going to come back in a moment. I just want to show you some of the things that I've done with these stamps, and then we can talk very briefly about doodling with Posca paint pens. Before I show you the samples of the stamped pages, I did want to come back to this for 1 second. This is that page I did a moment ago where I picked up the paint that was left on the surface. You can see how awesome this is on the black, smooth and sturdy. So don't necessarily think that you have to just wipe up and toss what's left on your table or on your brayer or anything like that. A lot of times I'll just brayer the color off right onto another page, and I let that kind of build up over time. So this is the citrus wheel that we did in the first segment. This used the Art Alchemy and it used the Fresco Finish Peacoat. Before I forget, Art Alchemy paint is currently on sale at 25% off, and the Posca paint pens are also on sale, I think, at 25% off. So now's a good time to stock up on either. So this design was done with Art Alchemy, you can see, and I feel like I need to add one more here to just kind of finish this chain. But I think this is the one named Rocks, and you can see it's a nice, simple design, but it just adds pattern to your background. This is actually named Burst, and it's this design right here. What happened was I picked up some leftover oxide sprays that are on my table, and I misted them. And then I thought, okay, let me try this. So I dunked the stamp in the misted oxides that were on the table, and I just picked it up and stamped it. So because they were wet, because I'd misted them, and because they're far more fluid anyway at almost water-like, and because the background was wet, you can see that the pattern of burst kind of is a little bit watery looking and not real distinct. Well, that's because I put wet on wet and it wicked a little bit, so it makes perfect sense. This is called Pods. I think that this is an awesome design. Lends itself to lots of doodling. You can do things like dot in the dots, circle around the dots. There's lots of different things. Again, this is Be With Me. You saw this previous. So let's talk for a second about these. This is a black, smooth and sturdy, 3" by 4" disc bound page. It's small, and you would think at first blush that maybe this burst is too big for it, but you can see if it hangs off the side, it becomes very much the focal image. It doesn't necessarily have to be used in the background. This is called, I think this is Sensuous Spirals. This is Sunset. Now, the thing I want to show you about this, hidden someplace in here, is that you can outline some of those elements. So for example, again, this is a black, smooth and sturdy 3 by 4, and all I did was print part of Sunset on either side here, and then I came in with a white PC1MR Posca paint pen and outlined around it. This is the same design, it's the full part of it, and I haven't done anything to it. I think this is called Megan. I think this is called Pinwheel. Now this is great because you could add elements to the ends of the spokes if you want. There isn't anything there, but that doesn't mean you can't add something. And then this is called Sand Dollar. How cool is that? Again, there's lots of space here if you want to show off an ombre or if you want to doodle on it. So let's talk a little bit about the doodles that I've done. And I'm going to bring these in. So this is, again, Burst, and this is a fine tip Pitt Artist pen that is the black, and it's the F, so for fine tip. Now, if I want to, I want to do this kind of sketchy. I don't want solid lines. But you can see how by outlining this, it really makes that design stand out off of the background, which is pretty busy, all things being equal. You don't have to be as fussy as I am. You can certainly be a lot more loosey-goosey if you really want. That's entirely up to you. But by doing that, as I said, it really helps that design stand out off of the background. This, again, is Sunny, and you can see this time I took a Posca. I want to say that this was either a 3M, a PC3M, or a PC5M, and all I did was dot around the outline. Very effective, and it makes that design really stand out off the background. Now this is one that I really like. I want to say that this is called Concentric, and what happened here is I love the color that I chose, but ignoring this one for a second, you can see that it really does kind of blend in with the background. So the solution to that, again, this is a PC1MR Posca paint pen, is to just come in and outline the shapes. And that means you go from this, where it's a little harder to see, whoops, if I could pick that up, where especially at this angle, where it's a little bit harder to see, to being perfectly, well, I missed a whole line here, didn't I? To being perfectly able to see the entire design because the black is highlighting the edges and making it very visible. So that's always an option. And then this was Citrus Wheel again, and this time, again, very sketchy. I came in because it really, the way that I stamped it, the colors were similar enough to the background. And then I thought, all right, well, let's take advantage of this kind of bump shape, and I repeated that on the border and then just painted it in a little bit. So these are Elizabeth's initial debut production run with us. Sorry, I can't talk here at the end of the video. 15 designs, all of them done in foam, and I hope that you have as much fun creating with them as I did as I was filming for today's video.